So great to have you join us. We have so many conversations on staff, and we want to invite you into a great ongoing conversation that we're going to have with our teaching team here at Bel Air Church. It's such a joy to be with an amazing group of preachers. We've got Rebecca Brochet Morgan,
What's up?
Mike Morgan, and our brand new member of the teaching team, Erika
Hey.
Gottfredson.
Yes.
And what a joy to have you. And, we have conversations all the time about many topics.
Mhm.
And one of those topics is what we get to preach on Sundays. And so we're just going to kind of dive in and invite people to join us in this conversation. Hopefully it sparks conversation in their life, and whether that's in community. What's so great in this season, we've got life groups here at Bel Air.
We do.
And you're writing curriculum
We
based
got
on the
curriculum that's
sermon
going to
series.
go along with the sermons each Sunday. So if you're in a life group, you definitely want to do this. We've got questions for you just to dive deeper. Because the whole thing we've been talking about is not just listening to the sermon on Sunday, but taking it into our lives and actually being formed by it, right? Transformed by it, letting it soak into our week. So even with this conversation, hopefully as you're hearing it, this maybe sparks something for you on your Tuesday or your Thursday. And you're like, oh yeah, I might try that today. And today we're talking about overwhelm.
Yeah, and so, I'm sure many who are joining us on this didn't even hear this sermon. So maybe this will be a catalyst to go back and listen to it.
Yeah.
And so there's going to be some links where you can follow up and listen to that. But many people also in our community did hear it. And basically, we start off a brand new series. It's a 7-week sermon series called First Response.
Yep.
And
So good.
the angle that we're taking through this whole sermon series is, what are our first responses when we experience very human things like making a mistake, being exhausted? In this past Sunday, the very first one, being overwhelmed. And I realized, when I started this, and maybe I'll start here, I used a very simplistic definition for overwhelm. And I really wanted to acknowledge in the audience how people have already associated an emotion, either positive or negative or neutral, to the word overwhelm. And I had people raise their hands. How many of you associate overwhelm with negative? The vast majority of people raise their hand. How many of you associate overwhelm with a neutral feeling? Some raise their hand. And the smallest amount was, do you see it as a positive thing?
Yeah.
And so I gave the definition, kind of a simple working definition of overwhelm, as being when the demands on you exceed the resources that you have. So I'm curious. So Erika, very first, maybe we'll just start here.
Yeah.
Is that too simplistic, overwhelm?
No, I appreciate it because I think that the simpler you can get, you can actually start to find the patterns in your life. So I think it's a great way to start the conversation.
So I don't know. What do you, Mike and Rebecca?
Well, it's not like anyone relates to it, though. That's the problem. Is the
Yeah, it
conversation
was
of overwhelm is like,
never been
hard.
never
I was
been
like,
overwhelmed.
I
Wow.
had no situation that I could pull from to
No,
really
I-
feel overwhelmed.
Right.
I look just like Christ.
Right.
All
Totally.
the time.
Well,
Same.
see, I
Same.
love that you even said
Yeah.
that, because our Christ, Jesus, demonstrates what overwhelm means. So
Mhm.
when you said the word overwhelm, it's not a moral issue. It's amoral. It's
Yeah.
neither good nor bad. It's a real feeling.
Mhm.
And Jesus experienced the feeling.
So give an example of in
one
the
of-
scriptures when Christ was overwhelmed.
Jesus, in his most vulnerable moment, I think, before his friends, his closest friends, he's in the Garden of Gethsemane, and he pulls his closest friends together and says, I am overwhelmed with sorrow.
Quote unquote.
Yeah.
You're not
Overwhelmed.
reading into the text there.
No,
That's literally
that's
the
what it
English
says.
Our
translation.
Messiah
Mhm.
was overwhelmed.
Yeah.
That's massive to think
Mhm.
about. Like, our God knows the experience of overwhelm.
Mhm. Yeah.
Like, what does that mean then?
Yeah.
Like, about, well, one, Jesus' humanity right there in perfect display, and it's not a bad thing.
Right.
In fact, I mean, I can go into it. I just love how he demonstrates it to his friends.
Really.
Like,
And
it's
even
so
like when
powerful.
you think about how he was overwhelmed with Mary of Bethany, pouring out her inheritance at his feet. Like that's the opposite side of that, where like he has come with emotion of like my creation sees me. I've been telling everybody this whole time for the last year that I'm gonna die. No one hears me. They're arguing about like who's gonna sit at my left and my right. And then here's this woman who's like, oh my gosh, he's gonna die. I have to pour out, give him everything, And so in that sense as well, it pendulum swings to this gratitude and this excitement about his creation seeing him. And I think that is another aspect of overwhelm that I haven't even thought about really.
I never thought.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's true. It's like we can be overwhelmed with
Absolutely.
joy,
Yeah.
right?
Exactly.
With emotion. So it's that spectrum of grief, of joy, of gratitude. And I love that because it also, like you said, it brings to light the humanity and the connectedness, because we will all have times, and you said this, we will be overwhelmed. And actually on Sunday, I think people were like, I'm currently overwhelmed.
Yeah.
You know, and as you were explaining like this and this and this, and you're probably overwhelmed in this moment. Like we're all like, yeah, like we're overwhelmed.
Actually, I'm feeling
So,
more overwhelmed the more you
but
keep talking.
But
Yes.
it's good because the whole point was, and we're going to get into the pain and peace cycle, because the first thing we're thinking of is, what is my initial response? What is my reaction, my human like knee-jerk reaction when I am overwhelmed? And we all have maybe different responses at this table. Some of us have similar ones, right? Drew, you talked about retreating. You're like, I'm withdrawing, like I'm out. Some of us might like double down and be like real aggressive, or we might like spiral into, you know, despair and depression, or we might just go, I'm checking out, let's go Netflix, let's go Amazon, let's soothe, let's numb. So we all have this range of what we do when we're initially overwhelmed. So what do we do when we're overwhelmed at this table? Erika Faye.
Oh, up
Just
first.
gonna give you that
Gosh,
softball
I know,
right
you're
there,
just throwing it to me.
sister.
Oh.
Well, okay,
Welcome.
I was pleasantly surprised to see, I think within like the first few minutes of your sermon, I was like, oh, that was my week. Like, I was like, I can pinpoint exact moment where I reacted. And it was like funny too, because like even in that process of being in the moment, I feel like I've practiced self-awareness as like a regular daily thing, but then just really reflecting even like after the event happened, going, oh my goodness, like that's like a deep childhood wound. And I never thought about how that correlates to this experience.
Yeah.
And even just kind of digging up the implicit memories, the things that we're responding to. And I really, you know, I think going back to what we were talking about too, about feeling the emotion, being present to ourselves. I think that really is what overwhelm is, right? We're being honest and integritous, and we're looking or having an emotional integrity with where are we truly? Because if we're just checked out or numb, we're not going to have an overwhelm. Like we're just going to have a flatline emotional experience in the world. But when we actually are living and experiencing things and being present to our griefs, our joys, our hopes, our disappointments, then we actually are opening ourselves up to that. So I personally responded like with a very, yep, that's me.
Yeah.
You
Very
experience
quickly.
overwhelmed.
Yeah.
Do you have an initial reaction? Like, you know, some people, the fight or flight mechanism, right? So are you a flight or are you a fight? Which one would you put yourself in when it comes to...
I'm actually a fawn. So there's four.
Yeah,
There's
yeah.
actually four as of the last
There's
few
more Fs.
years.
Me with
It's
the
true.
dichotomy there.
So
It's
fawn
just-
is like extreme people pleasing. So it's
Oh.
actually like a more sophisticated stress response. It's when the other three don't meet your need. So you go into actually trying to placate and fix and console and, you know, basically be everything to all people. So that would probably be my that's my go-to.
That's a
Wait,
good
so
one.
there's fight, flight, fawn. What's
And
the
freeze.
and freeze?
Ah,
Mhm.
freeze. Okay,
Yeah.
sure.
We love the alliteration.
I know,
so
don't we?
freeze
I know.
is
We,
good.
I'm like, oh, yeah, it's good. It's good. But I think, and I took a note on this too, and I'm glad you brought this up, the childhood wound component here, like for what triggers us and the pain and peace cycle. And for me, it would be, so withdrawal kind of, but the feeling would be I'm alone, right? Because of abandonment issues, right? You guys know I had a dad that passed away when I was young, so then there was no father there. So there's this sense of like, I'm by myself, right? I've got to fend for myself in this overwhelm, like I'm alone. And I think that can be such a lie. So if the first response is I'm alone, then the invitation of Christ would be, I'm with you in this. You are not alone.
Yeah.
And then even beyond that is finding Christ in my community around me to help kind of carry the burden of feeling that overwhelm. Like I don't have to do this by myself, right? And isn't that what we're trying to do as a community, as a church, to walk with each other in the overwhelm, not to say it doesn't exist or you shouldn't feel it. And I love how, Drew, you're like, you should feel overwhelmed this week. Like, I hope you do.
I actually hope
And-
that for
Yeah.
people.
You prayed that for
Yeah.
people.
And Mike felt it. He's
Which
like,
I
yeah, I
was
feel
like,
overwhelmed.
yeah.
right
Wow,
now. Thanks,
Monday
Drew.
came, and I'm
Yeah.
like, thanks for that prayer. Your prayer's
You're
been
like,
answered.
I
Just
was
so you
like,
know.
Why?
God already answered your prayer.
Yeah, it's true.
But it's totally like reorienting, because it's going, if I rely on myself, then I'm in a bad place. But if I can rely on Christ and be reminded of his presence with me in this, then that overwhelm feels lessened.
Well,
So that's
And
been
actually, I
resonating.
would say as well, like we are all going to be overwhelmed this week, regardless of you commanding it over us or not, you know. But it's now we're aware of like, oh, whoa, like, oh, I'm looking for this. I'm like upstream to like what's happening this week. I'm not on the defense. I'm actually on the offense, and I'm going to be challenged this week in my emotional health. And how do I respond to God? And being able to be aware of like, what are my triggers? Like, what are my responses, my stress responses? Being able to understand ourselves, even in relationships in different contexts. Are there patterns? Or do I see this in a specific like combination of circumstances and factors? And that really is the awareness piece. I think that I love from your sermon of really challenging us as the church, as a body of Christ, to be present to ourselves and present to our circumstances and have agency in those experiences.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, you talked about
agency.
reflecting being that first thing. And there's some crazy statistic, and I'll back this up somehow. But it was like, it's like most of Americans aren't self-aware. It's like 80%, like some astronomical
know what you're talking
crazy
about.
number.
No one
Right?
knows.
Like
Yeah.
we'd rather not know. Like, I don't want to know.
Yeah, so
But-
you go to self-awareness, but then you have agency in the response to that self-awareness, right? So that's where the Hargraves are really great about this, in that the pain cycle has a movement of peace to it, that you don't have control over the fullness of the cycle. You only have control over yourself. And so as we become aware, then what's my health, my movement towards health and a healthy response that I have control over, which I don't have control over all of my circumstances, but I have control over how I respond in my circumstances. And I love that in that picture of Jesus in the garden, he was feeling overwhelmed prior, I think, even coming into the garden. I think he had an opportunity there to have a positive movement towards community. And his first response in that moment was to communicate that to his closest friends.
Right.
And you made this comment, what's people's reaction, right? You asked that question. What's your reaction when someone communicates to you that you're overwhelmed? You know, when you say you're overwhelmed, how often do you tell people I'm overwhelmed? And are you met with any kind of like understanding, tell me more?
Or is it judgmental or critical, or like, oh, you shouldn't be overwhelmed. Come on, like step up.
But there's that
Yeah.
step that you make that Jesus demonstrates for us of communicating that in the community. And then he takes it even further and deeper, literally deeper into the garden. He takes it deeper in to communicate that with his Father, right? And I think those are two really healthy, he can't control all of his circumstances, but he's able to make those healthy decisions. And we can model that, I think.
Yeah, I
Powerful.
think so much stems out of a false view that overwhelm is a bad thing.
Yes.
And so if we, rather than see it as this neutral thing, or use the word amoral, I think, right? Rather than morally negative or a sign of immaturity or a sign of, you don't have it all together. I think if we falsely have that as a starting point, then what I hear so frequently, and it's not just in the world around me, but it's very frequently in the church, it's either no, you can do it. It's not that big of a deal. Come on, just no, you can do it, which we believe is helpful and encouraging, but that actually reinforces the idea that actually the solve for overwhelm is you better get it together and be better, which on one hand, on one level is a good thing. Like we have a growth mindset and God calls us to grow, but if it is taken to an extreme, it creates the false view of this performance illusion of, I have to do this, and if I don't do this, then something must be wrong with me. Then maybe God doesn't love me, and I don't earn God's love. And then I live in such a way where I have this facade projecting upon other people I have it all together. Or the other route that I think often happens is, maybe you shouldn't do it. If it's overwhelming, like why do it? Like why put yourself through that stress? So I hear that a lot, and I hear that a lot in the church. And it's under the guise of discernment and wisdom, like, don't put yourself out there. Like, no. Like, if it's uncomfortable, no.
Right.
Imagine what this world would look like
Totally.
if we just stayed in our comfort zones. And so I think a different starting point of, no, it's this human experience that Jesus experienced in both overwhelm of intensity, of the hardship, but also overwhelm and the intensity of overwhelming joy. Because that's also a thing where people don't want to cry in front of others, or
they
they
don't receive love. When
receive
someone's
love.
honoring
Yeah,
them,
they deflect.
They're like, no, I'm not. I'm not. That's not me.
They're good.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a reason for that in our culture. Yes, we can talk about our relationship with Jesus and like communicating our overwhelm with God. But when we communicate our overwhelm with one another, especially in the workplace, there's how do you do that as a Christian, right? So you're a high capacity person, you're in a leadership role, and yet you experience overwhelm, and you are able to communicate
Minute
that,
by minute.
right? You're able to communicate that to other people.
I mean, in the back of my mind, I'm overwhelmed with some things that I got to navigate this week
Yeah, sure.
while being present here.
Right.
It like never turns
Never
off.
turns off. But to be able to say that, like, look, high capacity people can be overwhelmed, and that's okay. It doesn't make you less capacity of a person, right? And so I think about people that are in the workplace that are leading, to be able to communicate that to their teams of like, I do feel overwhelmed at times. And if you don't, then like check your pulse, like what's going on, and you're not God. And you're not, we're human beings. We're going to experience this. So.
And I think it's a characteristic of resilience, because you think about Jesus, like he was the most emotionally regulated person there has ever walked the earth. Like on the way to the cross, he ministered to like 30 people. Like it would have been totally fine if he had just like zipped up and been like, I'm just going to do this. But he's like healing the soldier that like is about to arrest him. He's like having a philosophical conversation with Pontius Pilate. He is making sure his mom's taken care of by John. I mean, the guy is like so present. And I think that to his suffering and to his pain and to the injustice of his everything, but he's also regulated. And I think I love that we started with the Garden of Gethsemane, because I think in that pause, he was able to figure out, what do I need? And it was like that honesty. And that's when he reached out to his community. Actually, friends, I need you to pray for me for an hour, just 1 hour. Like, just give me an hour. You know what I mean? I'm about to go like save everybody and also fix all your lives on the way to the cross. But could you just give me 1 hour? And I think that that is where that's differentiation between like our childhood experiences of trauma and not having enough or neglect or abandonment or all, in all those different forms. When you're a child, you don't really have agency. Like you are kind of stuck at the mercy of the situation, the circumstance. You can't feed yourself. You can't do these things. You can't fix your problems. You can't pay your bills, right? You're hoping and, like hopefully experiencing a very secure caregiving experience, right? But as you get older, then you have to take ownership for that and go, actually, like it's my job to now know what I need. Like I need, and it's that pause that we don't react and get into that emotional dysregulation, and we start just making fires out of our trauma or even just our inability to cope with heightened experiences. But then to be able to have this articulation of like, actually, right now I just need a group of friends. I mean, I think that's been a huge thing in my mind too, of like being able to be present to myself of like, gosh, this is really overwhelming, God. And I know you're here with me, but also like, what is a practical thing I need in this experience that's going to help me make the decisions that I need to make to move forward? And that's, Jesus modeled it for us, and I love it.
Well, as you talk about emotional regulation, that's so important. And for me, I haven't considered this. Looking at that scene where you're looking at Jesus going deeper, but with his 3 closest friends, Jesus is demonstrating a regulated life, but his friends are falling asleep. Is that because they weren't emotionally, like they were experiencing significant emotional overwhelm as well, but their reaction is to fall asleep because they're exhausted because of the overwhelm, right?
Absolutely.
But there were 3 guys there. They could have been interacting with each other. They could have been leaning on each other. They could have been encouraging one another in that moment. They chose not to, and they fell asleep not only on Jesus, but they fell asleep on one another. And I think that there's an awareness of like, how do I handle my overwhelm in a way that is healthy for me and also those that are around me? I just have never reflected upon that moment with that kind of framework that you just gave us. That was interesting for me. Thank you.
Well, I love the honest connection here too of, and Drew touched on this, the Psalm 13 moment of how long? Oh Lord, like how long? Just that initial honest, raw lament, like the unfiltered, oh, I'm not gonna like make God mad at me for just being really honest about the feelings of overwhelm. Just to have that space first, I feel like is such a great initial first response. Not to be like, this doesn't exist, I'm gonna avoid it or I'm gonna ignore it or whatever, but to go, and that goes back to the awareness, the reflection. This is what I'm experiencing right now. Like, this is the truth.
Right.
And it's hard. And then I think having safe people, having friendships, who people we trust who are safe to come into those experiences with us, not to give us, some little Bible verse to make it go away, but to just sit with us in it, to help carry it for us, I think is such an underrated part of the whole process of how we deal with overwhelm in our culture.
Absolutely.
I think the great lie is everyone has it together. That is the biggest lie ever. Like, please.
Or mature people should have it together.
Right.
That's
Or
right.
aren't you a
Strong
mature
people.
Christian? Like,
Right, totally.
and it's just so like, wait a minute. Like, there's that bumper sticker that's like, if you're not angry, you're not paying attention or something. I want to be like, if you're not overwhelmed, you're not paying attention.
Absolutely.
It's like you also said, there's so many things coming at us. News cycles, family life, the financial situation. I mean, just a lot of stuff. So in a way, we're all overwhelmed, right? So how do we act? Are we going to be honest? Are we going to reach out to community? And that's the hope, is that we would.
So I wonder if even like as a practice, and this is part of the oddness of me, which everybody's got their own oddness, right? But I feel like there's so many situations that I can't control that overwhelm me, and I don't know that they will happen until they happen, and they sneak up on me all of a sudden. And a spiritual practice, if I can even use that language, is to choose situations where I'm overwhelmed, and I go into it volitionally, and I do it in an environment of support, and I do it in an environment of this is beyond my resources, but I'm going to find myself in a situation where it is, the demands exceed my
Absolutely.
available resources. But when I volitionally choose that, like learn a new language,
Mhm.
like go out and try to run a 100-mile race,
Mm.
learn a new instrument, these are actual things that I'm, doing. It pushes back against the need to either be perfect at everything or great at everything.
Absolutely.
And then I find myself absolutely in these very uncomfortable situations. But then going back to a word you used, I learn resiliency
Mhm.
so that I can then apply that to the situations that I
Absolutely.
haven't chosen.
Mm.
So ironically, the best spiritual practice I've ever done for being a pastor is spending ungodly amounts of time suffering in the mountains on
Right.
these endurance things, because I am
Absolutely.
forced to cry out to God to ask for help.
How long, oh Lord?
How long, O Lord,
How
right?
long?
Or even I went through this thing where I had this race, last year in Arizona, and I chose not to have a crew
Mm.
because I didn't
Wow.
want to burden people with having to deal with 24 plus hours of crewing me.
Mm.
Hmm.
I didn't finish.
Wow.
And the
Mm.
person next to
That'll
me,
preach.
who at the moment I quit, all they could talk about was how much they were looking forward to the crew that they were going to meet another 10 miles.
You're like, can you introduce me to them? 'Cause I'd
Yeah,
like
and
to
they
meet them
and
as
they
well.
finished, and I realized, there's that African proverb: if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. But to go
Yeah.
together
Yeah.
means you got to ask for help,
Yeah.
Right.
which
Totally.
means you have to realize I don't have the resources within myself
Absolutely.
to meet the demands that will be there.
Yeah.
So I'm
Totally.
curious: are there anything that you
Hmm.
could imagine choosing to do
Hmm.
to develop like a healthy,
So you're learning another language.
yeah,
What language?
Japanese?
No way.
Yes.
Can you say something right now,
No.
please?
Tomo arigato.
What?
It's
There
like,
you go.
it's
Get
like, it's
it?
like, just little things.
I love
Yeah,
that
are there
idea.
things that you're choosing? Are there things that
Um,
you're, I can think about all the things that are stressing,
Mm.
all the stressors in my life. And there's a
Mhm.
practice where you can say, I have agency and I have the ability to make change, and it's a high priority. It's a high priority, but I can't change it. It's a low priority and I can change it. And it's a low priority and I can't change it. And if you put them in those quadrants, I tend to go after the low priority, I can change it, because I don't want to go into the quadrant of the high priority because that's too
Mhm.
stressful
Mhm.
and I don't really want to experience it. So, example would be taxes. I hate taxes. Not that I don't want to pay taxes. I do want to pay taxes. Okay,
For the
let-
record,
Let
for the record, let everyone know, I do want to.
We're keeping it
I
legal.
my hands are sweaty just talking about taxes,
Mm.
and I know that I have agency over that, and it's a high priority, but I avoid it like the plague, and I go after something else that's less than, that I can change, that I can feel like, okay, good, I'm getting something done, but I'm not really going after that main thing that I really need to focus on. So if I think about something that I need to move into, it could be I do need to learn Spanish. I do, I want to work out more, and I need to do my taxes. Like,
Yeah.
and I know they're passed already, and I'm just confessing to
Mhm,
everybody I still need to
mhm,
do that because
mhm.
I've been avoiding, right? So what am I
Mm-hmm.
avoiding? Paying attention to the thing that I'm avoiding
That's a good
is
one.
probably the thing I need to lean into.
Totally.
Yeah.
The avoidance piece.
good.
Probably a good sign that you need some more challenge in your life.
Mhm.
But I mean, I think also I'm just thinking about from like a pastoral position with kids, and I think like just plug for children, children's ministry. Like, I kind of cringe when people blame children for bad behavior,
Mm.
because I love like the work of Dr. Ross Green. Like he says, kids do well if they can.
Mm.
So as the caregiver, it is my job to actually be the regulator for that child. Like they actually don't have the neurological circuitry to calm down. They actually need a co-regulator. Like
Mhm.
and even Jesus has models that for us, right? Like he's like, I am your peace, right? So we need a co-regulator. Like, and going back to what you were saying earlier, like we actually need this outside like experience of the Lord to meet us in our overwhelm. But I think too, like one of my challenges, kind of the practice weekly, even with the kids that I do, because I deal with all different types of behavioral challenges. And I think the window of tolerance of being able to be like expanding that, like really pushing that window of tolerance and being able to go, you know what, like I actually am responsible for this child's behavior. I need to figure out, it's my job to figure out how to support this child to do the best they can, right? And so I need to be curious, and I can't blame them. And I think that's probably where I challenge myself the most, like practically, is like I don't walk into situations and blame the person under me. It's actually, and that's just for leadership all around the board, like being able to be like, actually the culture of my team is set by me. And I need to take responsibility for that, and being able to go like, you know what, actually, like I am going to challenge myself to be the answer and solution in this situation. And obviously there's agency and cooperation and stuff like that. But I have found in the last few years of working with kids and really doing a neurosystem perspective of understanding that they actually are not going to do well without my support and me being able to create a supportive environment. It's really taken the shift where I'm starting to see kids we don't have those problems anymore. We don't have like the tantrums and we don't have different challenging behavior because I'm taking ownership for the culture of our teams and how we're setting up the program. So that's personally, it's a daily, weekly, constant confronted of like, this is mine. I got to own it.
And I imagine there's so many demands in that kind of culture that you have to ask for help and you got to build a team around you and get resources.
Absolutely.
Well, let me kind of turn a corner here as we get towards the end. We've mentioned it, but the pain and peace cycle.
Yeah.
So Terry and Sharon Hargrave are Christian therapists. We've had them here on campus. They've done workshops. They developed the restoration model of therapy, but they've essentially developed this kind of visual framework that we're referencing here. And if people aren't aware of it, it's this idea that as we move throughout life, we ask ourselves two questions: am I loved and am I safe? And the human experience is we will find ourselves in situations and in relationships where we experience pain because we are not purely loved or truly safe. And so in that, feelings come up and we have coping mechanisms to protect ourselves. And it goes a bit back to, these implicit kind of childhood, under the surface subconscious things, and that can develop a pain cycle completely unaware of what we're doing. And often that's where our first response comes out of a pain cycle. And there's this great worksheet where you can look through, what are certain feelings that you might resonate with, and then certain coping mechanisms that you do. And I can pull out that sheet and say, oh my gosh, that's me, and that's me.
Is a carne asada burrito on the list of?
I wish there was, I mean, you can kind
That's
of
where I go
stuff
in
it,
pain.
right?
That's where I
That's
go.
where I tend to go in pain.
Right?
Yeah.
I go there in
Straight to
joy
the
and in
taco
pain.
stand.
It's weird.
Totally. I mean, that's my peace cycle.
That is.
Yeah. So and then to kind of finish this idea of to choose then to move out of that pain cycle into a peace cycle, and the peace cycle isn't coping based upon your feelings, but it's acting based upon truth.
Totally.
And I've got this great couple-page worksheet, and maybe we'll link it up in the show notes. I just share it with people. But when you hear about that pain and peace cycle, and you've been familiar with it for years, and I think it's more a newer modality to your understanding. There's so many great modalities out there, but say more about that and how you found it helpful as a way to understand.
So even in the context of a marriage, what we recognized years ago is, right, so if something triggers a feeling of abandonment for me, that might trigger something, you retreat in pain, right? You pull away, and that would trigger an abandonment pain for me. So then it starts this cycle, right? Of like you're hitting each other's triggers, and that can just spiral down. So instead of, and we've talked about this, right? Instead of your initial like wanting to retreat, and this can happen not just in marriages, but in relationships. If the initial thing is, I'm not going to retreat, I'm going to stay in the relationship, I'm going to stay present to it, then that's going to eliminate the trigger that I would get in my pain cycle, right? So then I'm not going to go like, what? Like, oh no, I'm all alone, or whatever that looks like. It's like he's stopping it by doing that. So that's just one, that's a quick example of where I've seen it.
It was a good
Couple
example
in relationship.
for me. That was a great example for me. I appreciate you saying that.
It's that moment of recognizing. It's that moment of awareness. When we all know it, right? You're like, this is happening right now. What am I going to do? Yeah. Am I going to choose a new path, or am I going to go the path I've always known? And we do that over and over again, and then hopefully it changes and becomes more organic.
Yeah.
And this is where I appreciate that too, because it's, for example, it takes Romans 12:2. So do not be conformed to this world, but rather be transformed by the renewing of your mind to know what is good and pleasing to the will of God. And often that passage which is so deep and is such a way of life and is so holistic and transformative and a journey that you'll spend your whole life on. And it often, in context and in Christendom, sometimes we reduce that to just a slogan that we throw at people. And what I love about the restoration model of therapy and the pain and peace cycle is it literally is this is what that passage means in practice. And to be transformed by the renewing of your mind is to know the truth of who you are, to know the truth of the situation, to know the truth of who God is, rather than to be conformed unknowingly to these patterns that are either just so hard baked into your life, or patterns that the world says, no, that's how you deal with it.
Right.
No, you should just, get out of that situation, or no, you can do, but that's part of the confirmation
That's
of
the
the world.
lie,
So
the
that's
opposite of
lie.
the truth,
Yes,
right? So
exactly.
if it's not the truth, it's going to be
Yeah, and
a
I think
lie.
also just I love that you brought that verse in because kind of to your point too, right? When you have had a 10, 20, 30-year decade of practicing a cycle, like it is going to be really awkward to shift the muscle memory to a new way of doing something, right? And that's the whole process of transformation. That's the conforming to Christ. And it is awkward. It is clunky. It is messy. You're going to like kind of stagger through it. But I think like what I really appreciate is that we're inviting all of us. I mean, I feel like we preach to ourselves first and then our families and then our neighborhoods, right? But like we're actually inviting ourselves to like do the actual daily discipleship with the Lord, which is like, let's get present to our overwhelm like right now, because really the reality is that like reactions are not bad. Reactions are, you're going to react to everything, you know what I mean? But the truth is like, are you doing it in maladaptive ways or adaptive ways? Ways that bring connection, bring that healing, bring agency, creativity, like that opportunity, like this is like an opportunity experience, or does it go into victimhood? Does it go into like, I'm alone, woe is me, I can't solve this. And so we're really trying to be transformed, right? Instead of reacting the way that the world would react, we're actually reacting in the ways in which brings life and peace and joy into situations, because that's our birthright.
Totally. And recognizing that everybody's on that journey.
Yeah.
So having that grace for everybody, right, in the midst of the overwhelm.
This week, I'm likely going to react in similar patterns that I was before. And yet now I have an opportunity to be aware of it. And then that, all the resistance is going to be there, right? But then the opportunity to say yes to something challenging, to step into that in a different way, and then to see how it brings about health, right? That's the experiment that I get to practice this week, to see, okay, God, I'm going to put this to the test now. I'm going to practice it and see the unwinding of, I think you used the word or the phrase hurricane of hurt.
When pain cycles in a family system, in a workplace, in a marriage, a parent, when the pain cycles as systems begin to collide into one another, it gets even bigger, and it's a hurricane of hurt.
Well, I mean, like, so
and the destruction that can cause,
but
within
to think that you can unwind that
Yeah.
in some ways by just how you're aware to yourself. So I'm going to acknowledge and just be honest. I likely will react in similar ways that I did last week, but now I have an opportunity to be aware to those things and choose differently. And the more I do that, then I will have that renewing, that transformative experience in my life.
Absolutely.
Well, we're just getting started on the series, first of 7 weeks. So overwhelm is the first kind of universal experience. So good sitting down with you, talking to each of you.
Fun.
Love it.
All right. Well, we'll continue the conversation in the weeks ahead and invite people to join in as well. Thanks all for your time.
Okay.